Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. I've been delivering food for one of those popular gig companies that you all know and love. The ones that will charge you way too much just to have McDonald's delivered to your house. Since I've been doing it for quite a while, I've seen a lot of strange and creepy things, and I've dealt with what I would consider the most terrifying people out there. Some of my favorites are the ones where the person that you're delivering to comes to the door smelling like death or not wearing enough clothing. To add to that aside, please, when you order food from a pizza place through Uber or DoorDash or whatever, please wear clothes, and please wear enough clothes to cover yourself. I can't tell you how many naked people I've seen through open curtains, or when they open the door to get their no-contact order. Well, anyways, moving past my complaints about people having no modesty at all, one of the other things we tend to run into are crazy people. Sometimes, you get people that have pretty clear mental issues, and I understand that a lot of them cannot control their mannerisms, and maybe that's what was wrong with this lady. But honestly, this situation scared the absolute hell out of me. This happened last year during the COVID-19 situation. And as stated, I was a driver for one of the companies that delivered food to people from random restaurants. This was near the beginning when we were still able to hand you your food, but then we also had the option to do the no-contact delivery. When we do the no-contact, we were still expected to make sure that the customer got their food. Basically, we were supposed to drop the order on the porch, ring the bell, and then step away to around 6 to 10 feet and wait a moment for the customer. I was very specific with how I did things. I wasn't one to just drop the food and then run back to my car. This order was a decent-sized order from a bar and grill, which was fine. I drove to the restaurant, got the food, and then headed out toward the customer's house. I was heading down the street and approaching the destination when I noticed the overall appearance of the neighborhood was starting to decrease. And by this, I mean that the houses went from pretty normal suburban homes to a bit run down, all the way to some of the houses looking really bad, and I would go as far as saying trashy. I was driving to the end of the road, and I was trying to find the house that I needed to deliver to. And honestly, I was starting to get one of those pits in my stomach. The last couple houses went as such. One house looked like kind of okay. One house was completely and totally trashed and looked like a drug house. And the last house looked decent. Looking at these three, I was honestly scared that the drug house was going to be where I had to deliver. So imagine my surprise when it wasn't, and the number matched the cleaner of the three houses. So I parked my car in front of the house and I grabbed the food, making my way up to the porch. As expected, I drop the order on the porch and I ring the bell. I then stand back and wait for the customer. Within a few seconds of my ringing the bell, I hear the door next door, the door at the drug-looking house. It flings open hard and then smacks against the siding. Obviously, this caught my attention, so I looked over to see what was going on, and I really wish that I hadn't. Out of the door comes a woman that had a look about her that was nothing shy of horrifying. She looked like she was genuinely pissed off at the world and like she wanted to hurt someone, and at that point in time, the only person nearby and the only person making eye contact was me. Out of nowhere, she yells, "What the hell are you doing? And what do you want?" I immediately looked up to the customer's door to wait for them to answer, and I tried to move on from that situation. I reached forward and ring the doorbell a second time and stepped back to my waiting position. Then out of nowhere, I get this incredibly sharp pain in my leg. I didn't think much of it, but when I look down, I see a screwdriver handle sticking out of my leg, and this crazy woman standing there and staring at me like I was literally the cause of every problem she's ever had. And the only solution was to stab me with a rusty screwdriver from her junk pile. I honestly cannot overstate how awkward this situation was. Yes, I had a screwdriver sticking out of my leg, and yes, I was starting to bleed some, and yes, she had seriously just stabbed me. But something about the moment of silence between us was just awkward. What exactly do you say to some crazy woman that stabbed you with a screwdriver while you were just delivering food to their neighbor? After a few seconds of silence, the customer opened the door and reached for their food, and almost grabbed it to go back in until he saw me, the neighbor, and the screwdriver. He dropped his food and ran out to the yard and basically stepped forward to get in between me and his neighbor. I don't really remember much between that moment and when the whole thing came to an end. I know that the neighbor was screaming that she had just stopped me from robbing him, and then the customer was screaming about something. I just remember feeling woozy and asking for them to call an ambulance, and for some reason, randomly thinking about how I wasn't going to mark my delivery as finished. If anyone's curious, yes, the cops came, and yes, I ended up in the hospital. Getting stabbed with a rusted and weathered screwdriver is something that they want you to get checked out for. I'm pretty sure she got arrested for this situation, but I don't really know because the officers never spoke to me about this situation. I did go back to delivering when I could. I just now have a bit of a limp and a nice circular scar where she stabbed me. I answered the door for a guy who was dressed as a UPS driver. It had the logo on his jacket and everything. I assumed that my parents had ordered something that I needed to sign for, so I answered it. But after opening the door and greeting him, I realized that not only did he not have anything for me, but there wasn't even a UPS truck in sight. He told me his name was Tony, and that he was selling lawn care services around the neighborhood. I started to figure out that maybe he was just a UPS worker who forgot to change clothes before starting his second job as a landscaper or maybe a gardener. But then, he started asking me weird questions, like if we had any security cameras or large dogs in our house. We do have security cameras, but they are quite hidden. I told him that we did not, and even though our largest dog is a 1-year-old beagle, I told him that we have 2 pit bulls. This entire time, he wasn't looking at me. He was almost looking around me, letting his eyes coast around the inside of my house, probably looking for visible signs of something valuable. He then asked me the weirdest question. He asked why I had my door cracked instead of opened all the way. I lied, and I said it was because I didn't want my pit bulls to see him and then start going nuts. Well, the truth is, I always do this when I answer the door for strangers, so I can close it as fast as possible should they try something. He then gave me a poorly made flyer for his supposed lawn care business, and then went off down the street to the next house. I shut my door and I locked all of the locks on it. Tony, I hope that I don't see you on the news anytime soon. So the setting is 2015. My sister and I are home alone watching Craigslist horror stories on YouTube. A bit ironic, I know. And now for reference, I was 13 while my sister was 17, and having these watch parties had become something of a habit as it was our last year together before she went off to college. We lived in a safe neighborhood, and nothing had ever really happened at that point that would give us any reason to be anxious about being alone. Well, anyways, time goes on, and my sister suggests that we ordered pizza since she was starving. I'm not one to turn down a pizza, so I naturally agree, and we place an order at a local pizza place. We continue watching our videos for another 15 to 20 minutes before I step out to use the restroom. And just then, I hear the doorbell ring followed by my sister getting up to go and answer it. So I carry on with my business with the assumption that it was just the pizza. But I'd say only 2 minutes had passed as I come back and I realized that my sister was still at the door talking to someone. I couldn't really make out what was being said, but I knew it was definitely a man's voice responding to her. As I go to see what was going on, my sister promptly shuts the door, pizza in hand. I initially assumed maybe there was just an issue with the payment, so I just tease my sister for taking so long and I go sit down. It didn't take long for me to realize that my sister wasn't eating despite this whole thing being her idea. And even more so, she had a very nervous look on her face now, and she wasn't really speaking much. I asked her what was up, and she proceeds to tell me that when she opened the door to greet the pizza guy, he looked at her as if he was checking her out and followed up by giving her the most unsettling smile that she has ever seen. She was just trying to get the pizza and go, as she had already paid online, but the creep insisted on trying to make conversation with her. The man pretended to fumble around trying to get the pizza box out of his bag, all the while asking very personal questions that he certainly had no business asking, like how old she was and if she was alone. Now, I admittedly thought that she was just messing with me. I mean, stuff like that can never actually happen to people you know, right? But nevertheless, it still left me feeling a bit anxious. We tried to enjoy the food and then move on, and I'd say about an hour or two later, we had finally calmed down about the whole thing. Right as we were getting ready to clean up and go back to our own rooms, there was a knock at the door, a very loud and aggressive one at that. We shared the same nervous look, then hesitantly slip over to a window to see if we can get a look at whoever's knocking. Now, I hadn't seen the guy, but my sister immediately recognized him as the pizza guy from before. We were contemplating calling the police, but the guy only knocked once or twice before getting in his car and taking off way too fast down the road. Almost like he knew that if he continued, he was more than likely going to end up in a lot of trouble. We made a round around the house, making sure everything was locked up, and then we waited for what felt like ages for our parents to finally get home. My sister told them about what happened, but my mother insisted that we were just being dramatic, that we had just made ourselves nervous because of the videos that we were always watching. While we both initially insisted on being serious, we eventually just gave up and tried to move on from the whole thing. We ordered from that place a few more times, but thankfully, we never saw that same delivery man again. Nothing else ever came of the situation, but I can't help but think about what could have happened if that creep had been just a bit more persistent. What if he kept trying to get into the house? Or what if we accidentally left the door unlocked? I think his intentions were obvious, and I can only hope that his behavior has caught up with him, and that he's somewhere out there getting the help that he mostly definitely needs. For some context, I live in a major city, and I currently don't do a lot of driving due to the ongoing issues with my car, plus the pandemic has made me turn to more delivery apps in general. So the other day around 1 p.m., I decided to order some lunch after doing a lot of cleaning. I placed the Ubereats order, and I found something to watch while I waited for the food. Within a few minutes, a driver accepted the order, and I noticed right away that the driver, Anthony, was on a bike. It didn't have a profile picture or any deliveries on record. At first, I wasn't alarmed at all. I was almost amused, like, "Oh, wow, guess I'm this person's first ever customer." But then a full 30 minutes passes with no driver movement on the app, and at this point, I think maybe something is glitching out or the driver is stuck. I contact support via the chat option, and they ended up assigning a new driver because they couldn't reach the first one. It was odd, but whatever. Now is when it starts getting a little weirder. The new driver assigned is in the exact same spot as the original driver was, and they are also on a bike. They also have no profile picture and have no prior deliveries as well. And this driver's name was Lori. I let another 20 minutes pass with no driver movement before I messaged them myself and say, Hi there. Are there any issues with my order?" And the app shows that the driver saw the message, but there was no response. All this time, I'm checking to see if Ubereats is maybe experiencing some issues, none that I could find, and at this point, while I'm definitely weirded out, I'm mostly just hungry, so I contact support again to request some assistance. They reassigned the driver again and apologized for the inconvenience. It was the same deal. They also tried to contact the driver, but there was no response. Finally, the third driver assigned is the exact same scenario, same spot, on a bike, no profile picture, and no prior deliveries. Only this time, the name is Robert, and before I can react and go about canceling the order at this point, because I'm just really tired of dealing with this, he suddenly has my food and immediately messages me the following. "Hello, I have your food. What's your phone number?" And I responded right away with, "I'm not super comfortable giving my phone number out when you can just message me here." And he responded again with, "What's your number? I'll be there in 10. How old are you?" And at this point, alarm bells are going off, and I contact support immediately to have the order canceled and get further assistance. I get connected to Uber's safety team, who informs me that the order has been canceled and I'll be refunded, and I started taking down the details of the strange interactions. As I'm giving the woman on the phone the info she needs, I'm starting to calm down, thinking that this was just some creep or something. And that's when I hear a man's voice at the front door. "Miss Metal Gear 42069, I have your food." And I can't even describe the chill that went down my spine because of the way he said it. Making things even worse, the Uber safety woman on the phone with me heard this as well and goes, "Is that him? We canceled the order." I poked my head around the door. My main heavy door was open, but the metal screen door was closed and locked, but allowed us to see each other. And then I get a look at him. And when he saw me on the phone, he went from smiling to looking furious. He suddenly got right up against the door and kept asking who I was on the phone with. And at this point, I've started asking him to please leave because he is making me uncomfortable and he's getting more and more angry. And at this point, he starts pounding on my door and grabbing the doorknob while shouting to be let in. The woman on the phone is asking if I'm okay, and the man is still shouting. So basically, I'm in a full meltdown mode, and at this point, I hurriedly close the heavy door to lock it. The man is becoming borderline belligerent as he kicks my door, and the woman tells me to call the police. He ended up walking away from my house about a minute after that and back up to the sidewalk. And for a moment, I thought that he messed up, so I finished my conversation with the Uber safety woman so she could submit the report. Once she submitted it, I called the police and I told them what happened. They weren't incredibly helpful at first since he didn't actually break in or put his hands on me. And they told me that if he came back, just to call again, and they would send an officer out. I did end up having to call them again and then give a full report, plus the description of the man since he didn't end up leaving right away. He stayed in the neighborhood for almost 20 minutes. According to one of my neighbors, after she heard the yelling, she saw the man that I described walk back up from my house to the sidewalk and then hop into a truck with another man in the passenger seat. And they apparently just sat there, staring at people walking by and being incredibly sketchy. And that's when she walked back towards my house and asked me what happened. Luckily, she was able to give myself and the cop a description of the vehicle and the other man as well. So basically, this was a very bizarre and uncomfortable experience, and I wanted to share it to maybe see if anyone has ever experienced anything like this. Because honestly, I'm still pretty shaken up, and I will be avoiding delivery apps for quite a while. So, strange Ubereats driver who asked me for personal info and then proceeded to try and break in. Please, let's not meet. And here's the riddle for this video. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. But I would also like to thank my amazing patrons, my top tippers, and my dearest channel members. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it with all of my heart. If you want to support the channel further, you could also choose to become a patron, a tipper, or a channel member. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video, along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.